Daniel was given a unique vision, and God said to him in Daniel 9:24-27 that he was going to show him an outline of history as concerning Jerusalem, his people, the Jews, and his city, the beloved city, Jerusalem. And so the focus of the prophecy and the timeline is Israel. In between, in this 70 years that Daniel was given this vision of, 70 times 7 years, a period of 409 years, it's broken into two. The first large part of 69 weeks of years in Daniel 9:24-25, we're told that it has a specific beginning point, and that would be the command to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, which is recorded in the book of Nehemiah, where Nehemiah is facing the Persian king Artaxerxes, who was alive at this time in 445 BC. The date we know is in the month Nisan on March 14. And when he sees his cupbearer, an important official, a Jew, in depression, he asks him why. And he says, I'm depressed because the city of my fathers is in ruins. Amazingly, this Persian king responds to this need, gives him the keys to the treasury, he gives him soldiers, he gives him the forest of the king, and he makes him governor of Jerusalem. Have you ever wondered, humanly speaking, why Artaxerxes, a Persian king, is so sympathetic to this Jewish cupbearer? There's a reason.
Tell me.
When you look in the chronology, you find that Artaxerxes is the son of Xerxes. His mother is Esther.
Oh, my
Remember
Lord.
when Mordecai said to Esther, who knows if God has raised you up for such a time as this to save your people? But he said, if you won't do it, God will raise up someone else.
That's fascinating.
She is used by God to confound Haman's plot to kill every Jew.
And used by God to
raise
prophecy.
a Jewish boy at her knee who obviously was simpatico to the Jewish people. And yet, I have talked to the chief rabbi of Israel, and I've asked him, I said, in your various synagogues and your various studies, yeshivas, have this ever been discussed? He said, no. We had a meeting later in the week. He said, you know, I think you're right.
You know, I've got to tell you, a precious part is because he's moving so fast. Here's what he is talking about, and this is why this is important for you to stay tuned and listen. Daniel the prophet was told by the Lord there would be a period of 70 weeks. Those 70 weeks came to 490 years. He said from the time the command would go forth to rebuild Jerusalem, which is recorded in Nehemiah, to the time Messiah would be cut off, meaning on the cross, is 490 years. But, like Grant said, that period was divided into two. From the time Nehemiah went out of Babylon to the time Jesus wept over the city was exactly 483 biblical years.
To the day.
To the day. Therefore, and the book of Daniel deals mostly with Israel. So God said in this prophecy, he said, this has to do with your people Israel. God wasn't giving him what's coming to the world. He did in other parts, of course, of the book. So now it's like a clock ticking, tick, 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 that began with the rebuilding of Jerusalem, finishes with Jesus weeping over the city, recorded in Luke. Now, the clock has not been ticking for 2,000 years.
That's right. We're in the age of grace. It's a parenthesis or a gap, because now when Israel rejected their Messiah, God turned to create a new people, Gentiles from every nation, together with Jews who would accept the Messiah. And during that time, which is of indeterminate length, no one can know the time of the rapture. Jesus said so. But we know that there's a generation in which a bunch of prophecies would be fulfilled, including the rebirth of Israel and many others.
Which all have happened. So what he's saying is the clock is about to tick again. It hasn't been ticking for Israel for 2,000 years. So the clock quit ticking when the Lord wept over the city. And now we are 208. It could begin to tick in 209 or 210 or 211 when the rapture happens. At which time Israel will have 1 week left. Remember?
7 years.
7 years. So the 483 have been fulfilled. We're waiting for the fulfillment of the last 7 years.
And it's the prince that shall come is the one who comes out of the people who destroyed Jerusalem. And we know historically that was the Roman legions who destroyed Jerusalem in 70
Absolutely.
AD, as Jesus said, not one stone will be left
Because he
unattended.
said, well, go ahead,
The
please.
people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. Well, the prince that shall come is the Antichrist. Therefore, he's going to lead the Roman people. This man is going to arise in the old revived Roman Empire, which was not only Western Europe, it also included all the North African nations and Israel and Syria, Turkey. And what is intriguing is Daniel, who was given such precision to the day of Christ being cut off on Palm Sunday, AD 32, 5 days before his crucifixion. He also was told that when the clock started ticking, it would start ticking when the Antichrist would rise in the revived Roman Empire, and he would make a 7-year treaty with Israel, a covenant with the many for a week of years. 7-year covenant. And when he makes that covenant, from the time it begins, anyone who's alive, Jew or Gentile, who has hold of a Bible or an old book on prophecy, will be able to mark their calendar and say, okay, the Antichrist who will be revealed at that time, because he's the one who makes the treaty with Israel, no one else. When he makes that treaty, go forward 7 years, and you can mark your calendar the Battle of Armageddon.
Yeah, God.
Now, it's not for us because we're in heaven at that time.
And you got to understand what Grant is saying is the agreement between Antichrist and Israel could happen within the next 5 to 10 years. It could happen that quick. And here's why. Because America is pulling away from the international scene. The Iraq War has caused we Americans to become tired. And now with the election over, this administration is going to focus on take care of the home front. Let's take care of Social Security, the economy, the education. Healthcare. America really no longer wants to spend its billions and trillions on defending the world. It's time for America to focus on its own people. And that's the right thing to do. But it's going to create a vacuum in the world, like the British did back.
After World War II?
Yeah. Well, Europe then will step right in. It's going to be
because
like
there's no one else. There's no one else who could. And
because Russia cannot do it.
No. And the Bible indicates that when the revived Roman Empire takes place, it will have a 10-nation superstate. Now, already Europe has 25 nations in the European Union. But that's so unwieldy. The French and the Germans and the British and the Italians are already saying, look, this is too unwieldy. We can't get a decision on having coffee with 25 people.
Exactly.
So let's have an inner ring of the superpower.
Have they said that already?
Yes, they have. And they're saying, let's have 5 to 10 of the superpowers. They'll make the decisions about military, economic, political. And so in this situation, the Bible indicates that the 10 nations come together as a superstate. Then and only then does the 11th horn of Daniel chapter 7 arise among the 10. He's not one of the 10. He's among them. He's a little horn who comes up among them. So he's not one of the kings or leaders of Europe. He's a man in the 2nd or 3rd rank.
Now, are you talking about the Daniel's revelation about the precise timeline here?
Yes, I am, because all of this has to happen within that 7-year period. When the 10 nations come together, and this man, this little horn who speaks blasphemy.
So that's what we're looking for now. We're looking for the 10 nations to come together out of the 25.
And that could happen before the rapture. We could see the 10 nations come together and we'd say, wow. But the man will come to the power when and only when the Holy Spirit removes his restraint.
Will we be here to know who Antichrist is?
I think some people will think, I'm almost sure that's the guy. But I don't believe
but
anyone will know.
Will the church be here to say, okay, Antichrist is on the scene, this is the guy?
No, I think
we won't know who it is.
Some Christians, some prophecy teachers will say, I think this is the guy. But until he is revealed, until he receives his throne, his power, and his authority from Satan, which happens only when the Holy Spirit removes his restraining influence. But that only happens at the rapture. So I think it's from heaven, we'll look down and we'll say, yeah, that is the guy. Some of us will have seen it, but I don't think anyone should say that's the guy.
Will we see anything while living about that kind of says, okay, we have so much time before the rapture?
I don't think so. I think there's a reason for that. I believe the rapture is not set firmly in time. I believe that's why Christ said, no one knows the day nor the hour. Because I believe to some degree God in our free will has allowed the church, by successfully and faithfully fulfilling the mission to go into all the world and preach the gospel, such as your ministry and many other great ministries are doing, that as we fulfill that great ministry, that mission, that finally the last person who Christ in his sovereign knowledge knows is going to come to Jesus as a Christian, and when that happens, he's going to say, come on home, because our job's done. Now he's going to turn back to Israel. Israel back in the land, Israel with a rebuilt temple, and then with the Antichrist making the treaty. From that point on, anyone who becomes a new believer, a tribulation believer, to differentiate them from the church today, they're going to live through the tribulation as long as they can. Many will be martyred by the millions. But when they do that, Pastor, anyone who's got a Bible will be able to say, okay, we know when the treaty was made. 7 years later will be Armageddon.
Okay, now I want to ask you another question. This is to me fascinating. I watch Israeli politics very closely. Mm-hmm. They're having re-elections in February of 2009. Bibi Netanyahu most likely will win from what the polls are saying.
Yes.
Livni, who's the present, well, she's trying to form a government. She's an intern, the prime minister, and cannot form a government. And you precious people may want to understand that the Israeli parliament has 22 parties. And they're trying to form a government with 22. That's quite difficult. It's a very, very complex way of governing. But anyways, he's going to probably win. 4 years later, he's going to, have to run, or if his government can't stand, he'll have to call elections prior to that. I can see total chaos in the Middle East within the next probably 3 to 4 years. It could happen that quickly. There's tremendous frustration now about the peace process. There was an article yesterday that said the Israeli population has said, we're giving up.
Because they don't believe they have a peace partner to negotiate with.
But what I'm saying is, I mean, an Antichrist can be sitting with Israel saying, I'll back you up, boys, within the next 5 years. And here, our own government is pulling away.
Let me tell you how dangerous it is. Let me tell you.
I mean, it's that close, is what I'm saying.
What the public doesn't know. 3 weeks ago, a ship coming from China full of iron ore and metal products came along the coast of East Africa, and Somalia pirates, 25 of them, sped out in their speedboats and captured it, as they often do. The Brits and the Canadians and the Americans blockaded the ship into a port in Somalia. Then they can negotiate. The Americans negotiating and realized that the leaders of the Somalia, the 25 pirates, were dying. They were disappearing. Finally, after about a week of this, 22 of the 25 were dead. When they finally concluded negotiations and got the ship, they went inside, and it wasn't iron ore or machine products. It was the largest dirty bomb ever created in history. A ship full of radioactive material.
This happened 3 weeks ago?
Yes. And explosives. And they found that the plan was to go through the Suez Canal, declare an emergency, and hope that Ashkelon Harbor or Haifa or one of the other harbors in Israel would allow them to come in for emergency repairs and blow the ship and destroy a city with radioactive material and make it uninhabitable for a century.
People, precious people, this is getting so scary that on the news today there was a report about what's happening on the Afghan-Pakistani border, which has become the most dangerous part of the world right now. The American general said that the Taliban have become extremely aggressive, more aggressive than ever. Even back during the days of the Mongols, they could not overcome the Afghanistani people. They have been warriors. No power has been able to defeat.
They don't give up.
The Afghanistani people, because the whole population are a population of fighters. And the United States is eventually going to pull out of Afghanistan like they're pulling out of Iraq. In fact, frankly, the Iraqi government is already asking American forces to leave, and now with Obama in, it's going to happen very quickly. And in fact, I'm for it. I agree that that should happen. But also, I must say I think they're going to pull out of Afghanistan. I think America's going to focus on America. It's going to bring Europe in as the superpower of the world, and this could happen like that. I mean, we're talking about months, not years.
You talk about the danger. This ship was sent by Iran. This is an act of war.
Lord, man.
And both America and Russia and Britain have put a clamp on this. But those who know how to search on the internet can find exactly what I have talked about. I have the documentation here. I wouldn't say such a thing if I didn't have the documentation. But we're in a dangerous time. And I believe with all my heart that we are moving very quickly toward the final days. And Daniel laid out that timeline, I believe, for a reason.
But now Daniel's timeline about the last 7 years begins really with the Antichrist signing a peace treaty with Israel.
And I believe it's not for the church. The timeline is for those new tribulation believers.
Yeah, and now so they'll be able to tell. Okay, they'll be able to tell from the time he signs to the time Jesus comes back. They're going to say, okay, now we know it'll be 7 years.
So
but we, the church,
don't take his mark. Don't give up. Run to the hills. Go underground. Hold out. Don't take the mark of the beast.
But that's after the rapture.
That's right. Even though it looks hopeless, because it will be like Hitler times 10, living as a Jew.
So our job as Christians is just preach the gospel.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing else for us to do really except preach the gospel.
But it's fascinating that Daniel was given such an insight that exactly 3.5 years after that treaty is signed, the Antichrist is going to stop the daily sacrifice that has been taking place in the rebuilt temple. Then somebody, probably a Jewish believer, is going to kill him, according to Revelation 13, with a knife, assassinate him. He's truly going to die. Then Revelation 13 says that the Antichrist is satanically resurrected by Satan. And it says the whole world...
Imagine he will copy the resurrection of Jesus.
That's right, a mock.
Can you believe that?
And then it says the whole world will worship the beast that has the wound by the sword and yet lives. This miracle will convince many people that he is what he claims to be, because first of all, he claims to be the Messiah. After he's assassinated and rises from the dead, he's not just a Messiah figure. This man will go into the rebuilt temple and he'll claim that he's God on earth.
Now listen, tomorrow...